They bound her hands and left her in the forest to die. But when the monster found her, he did something no one expected. The morning I learned I would die began like any other. I woke to birdsong filtering through the wooden shutters of my tiny room. The pale dawn light, casting everything in shades of gray and amber. For one blessed moment, I let myself believe today would be ordinary, that I'd tend the herb garden, maybe walk to the village market if my stepmother Giselle allowed it. That illusion shattered the moment I heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. My father Tobias appeared in the doorway, shoulders hunched like he was carrying a physical weight. Behind him, Giselle's sharp features twisted with poorly disguised satisfaction. "The Alpha has called for you," my father whispered, unable to meet my eyes. "My name is Nyla, and I am Omega, the lowest rank in our pack hierarchy. The Alpha never called for wolves like me. We were useful only for menial tasks, for healing herbs, for things that didn't matter. Important wolves didn't concern themselves with the insignificant. Why?" The word came out steadier than I felt. Giselle pushed past my father into my cramped sleeping quarters. "Do not question the Alpha's wisdom. You are needed for the good of the pack. That should be honor sufficient." The good of the pack. Those words carried weight in our community, an obligation that superseded individual survival. My stomach twisted with dark premonition. I'd heard whispers in recent weeks, fragments of conversation that died when I drew near. Attacks along the border of the forbidden forest, something massive and savage that moved through the trees with unnatural stealth, leaving carnage in its wake. 3 warriors dead in the last month, their bodies so mangled we barely recognized them. The monster, the cursed wolf. Stories varied, each more terrifying than the last. Some claimed it was twice the size of any natural wolf, with eyes that burned like golden fire. Others swore it was a demon given flesh, punishment for ancient sins our pack had long forgotten. And now the Alpha had called for me. No. The word escaped before thought could temper it. The word escaped before thought could temper it. My father flinched. Giselle's expression sharpened with something darker than anger. "You will obey. The Alpha has chosen you for sacrifice to appease the beast. Your death may purchase safety for the rest of us." Sacrifice. The word hung in the air, stealing oxygen from the small room. They would bind me and leave me in the forest, an offering to whatever horror dwelled there. I would die alone, in terror and agony, so that others might sleep peacefully in their beds. "I am your daughter." I looked at my father, searching desperately for some flicker of protection, some sign that he valued my life above his own fear. Tobias turned away. "You are needed. The Alpha has spoken." "You are not his daughter," Giselle corrected with cruel precision. "You are his burden, born of a first wife, who gave him nothing of value before she died. This is your purpose, the only contribution you will ever make. Be grateful you can serve something greater than your own worthless existence." The venom carved deeper than usual, delivered alongside a death sentence. I thought of my younger half-sister, Verna, only 16, who sometimes offered small kindnesses when our mother wasn't watching. Would she weep for me? Or would relief that she hadn't been chosen override any grief? When? My voice had gone hollow. Now, the ceremony begins within the hour. The entire pack gathers to witness your bravery. Giselle's smile contained no warmth. Dress appropriately. They left me then to prepare for my own execution. I remained sitting on the narrow bed, hands trembling in my lap. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to flee through the window and never return. But where would I go? Omega wolves didn't survive alone. Without a pack, I would starve or be killed by rogues who would sense my vulnerability from miles away. I had no choice. I had never had a choice. Moving with mechanical precision, I washed my face in the basin of cold water. The dress I chose was simple, undyed wool that had belonged to my mother. Wearing it felt like armor, a reminder that I descended from a woman who had been strong and kind. before illness claimed her. If I must die, I would die as my mother's daughter. Music swells ominously. The walk to the village center passed in a blur. Faces I'd known my entire life watched from doorways and windows. Some with pity, most with relief that fate had chosen another. Children who once played with me now pressed against their mother's skirts, staring with wide eyes at the Omega who would become their salvation. The gathering place was an open square of packed earth, encircled by stone markers worn smooth by centuries of weather. The entire pack had assembled hundreds of wolves in human form, creating a wall of bodies and judgment. At the center stood Alpha Desmond. His presence commanded attention without effort. Perhaps 45 winters, his hair more gray than brown now, but his physique remained imposing. The mark of Alpha showed in the way others unconsciously created space around him, in the careful neutrality of their expressions when his gaze swept over them. Beside him stood his Beta, Garrick, broad-shouldered, his loyalty to Desmond legendary. Warriors flanked them both, the pack's defenders who had failed to stop the monster killing their brothers. Nyla. Desmond's voice carried across the square, silencing all conversation. Approach. My feet moved of their own accord, carrying me forward through the parted crowd. I felt their stares like physical touches, assessing my worth, measuring whether my death would be adequate payment for their continued survival. When I reached the Alpha, I lowered my eyes in automatic submission behavior, trained into every Omega from childhood. Look at me. It wasn't a request. I raised my gaze, meeting those calculating gray eyes that had governed my life since birth. Desmond studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. You understand why you have been chosen. Yes, Alpha. What else could I say? That I didn't wish to die? That terror clawed at my throat until breathing required conscious effort? Such truths were irrelevant. The beast has taken from us, Desmond continued, his voice pitched to carry to every listener. Warriors, providers, fathers and sons. It grows bolder with each passing moon. We have set traps. Nothing deters it. The elders have counseled that perhaps what is required is not violence, but offering. Blood has been spilled. Let us see if blood offered freely will appease the creature's rage. Blood offered freely. As though I had chosen this, but I understood the performance. Desmond needed the pack to believe this was noble, that my death meant something beyond expedience and fear. You serve your pack with this final act, Desmond said. Your name will be remembered, an empty promise. Within a generation, I would be forgotten, reduced to a cautionary tale. But I inclined my head, accepting the lie because resistance would change nothing. Garrick stepped forward, heavy rope coiled in his hands. The binding was ritualistic, meant to prevent me from fleeing once left alone in the forest. They wrapped it around my wrists, pulling tight, then secured my ankles with enough slack to walk but not run. The rough fibers bit into my skin, and I wondered distantly if I would bear rope burns when the wolf finally tore me apart. Drums begin, slow and ceremonial. The procession to the forest's edge moved with ceremonial slowness. Desmond led, with Garrick and 2 warriors escorting me. The pack followed at a distance, a silent mass bearing witness to my fate. I glimpsed Verna among them, her young face streaked with tears she tried futilely to hide. Our eyes met briefly, and I managed a small smile, forgiving her for the cowardice of silence. What could she have done? Challenged the Alpha and been exiled or killed? The forbidden forest loomed ahead, ancient trees creating a wall of shadow even in daylight. Local legend claimed the woods were cursed, that those who entered too deeply never returned, their souls trapped forever wandering beneath the canopy. Whether such stories held truth or were merely superstition, the forest had been forbidden for as long as anyone remembered. None ventured past the first line of trees, none except the condemned. At the boundary, Desmond raised his hand, halting the procession. The warriors pushed me forward until I stood at the very edge, where sunlight ended and darkness began. The air felt different here, heavier somehow. laden with a presence that raised the fine hairs along my arms. "Beyond this point, you walk alone," Desmond announced. "May your sacrifice grant us peace. May the beast be satisfied and retreat to the depths from which it came." They untied the rope around my ankles then, granting me the ability to walk into my own death. My wrists remained bound, rendering me helpless against whatever awaited in those shadows. I looked back one final time at the pack, at the faces of people I'd known since childhood who now watched with varying degrees of pity and relief. My father stared at the ground. Giselle wore satisfaction barely concealed. Verna sobbed openly, restrained by their mother's firm grip. No one spoke in my defense. No one stepped forward to say this was wrong. That offering one of their own to a monster made them no better than the beast they feared. I turned away from them, from the pack that had never truly been mine, and walked into the forbidden forest. The temperature dropped immediately, as though the trees held captive some ancient cold that daylight couldn't reach. My footsteps made no sound on the carpet of fallen leaves, centuries of decay creating a path that seemed to absorb noise. Behind me, I heard the shuffle of the pack retreating, returning to their safe homes and ordinary lives, already forgetting the Omega, who had purchased their security with her blood. I walked because standing still felt like hastening the inevitable. My bound hands made balance precarious, forcing me to move carefully to avoid tripping over roots that snaked across the forest floor. How far should I go? How deep into this cursed place before the wolf found me? The questions seemed absurd, but my mind clung to them, grateful for any distraction from the terror building in my chest. Time lost meaning beneath the canopy. Minutes could have been hours. The forest remained unnaturally silent, not even birds daring to sing here. Just my breathing, too loud and too fast, and the whisper of wind through branches high above. Then I smelled it. Musk and pine. Wild and potent, the scent of predator. Every instinct inherited from my wolf bloodline screamed danger, though my human form couldn't respond with the speed or strength that might save me. I froze, my heart hammering so violently I thought it might tear free from my ribs. The undergrowth to my left rustled. Something massive moved through the shadows, circling me with deliberate patience. I caught glimpses of silver-black fur, of a body far too large to be natural wolf. The stories hadn't exaggerated. This creature was enormous, easily twice the size of any shifter in wolf form I'd ever seen. It emerged from the trees directly in front of me, and my breath stopped. Music swells dramatically. The wolf was beautiful and terrible in equal measure. Its coat was the color of storm clouds, silver gray darkened to near black along the spine. It moved with fluid grace despite its size, muscles rippling beneath that magnificent fur. But it was the eyes that held me frozen, unable to flee or fight. Golden, burning with intelligence far beyond any animal, and fixed on me with an intensity that stripped away every defense. This was no mindless beast. Whatever this creature was, or had been, awareness lived behind that predatory gaze. I closed my eyes, unable to watch my own death approach. I heard it move closer, felt the displacement of air as the massive head lowered toward me. Hot breath ghosted across my face and throat, scenting me as I had scented it. Any moment now, teeth would close around my neck. The wolf sniffed along my jaw, down to where my pulse beat frantically at the base of my throat. I waited for the killing bite. It didn't come. Instead, a low rumble emanated from the creature's chest. Not quite a growl, something deeper and more complex. The sound vibrated through my body, raising goosebumps along my arms, despite the lack of any true cold. Then, impossibly, the wolf stepped back. My eyes flew open in shock. The massive creature was retreating, moving backward with its gaze still locked on my face. The golden eyes held something I couldn't name. Confusion? Before I could process what was happening, the wolf turned and vanished into the forest, leaving me standing alone, alive, and completely bewildered. Silence for 3 beats. I stood frozen long after the wolf vanished, my mind struggling to process what had not happened. I was alive. The realization arrived slowly. like blood returning to a limb that had fallen asleep, bringing with it pins and needles of confused relief. My bound hands trembled, and I looked down at them as though they belonged to someone else, expecting to see claw marks or blood. There was nothing. Not even a scratch. Why had it spared me? The question circled through my thoughts, finding no purchase. Beasts didn't retreat from easy prey. Yet the wolf had done exactly that, had looked at me with those impossible golden eyes, and chosen to walk away. The memory of its regard sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with cold. Intelligence had lived behind that gaze, awareness that felt disturbingly human despite the animal form. The forest remained unnaturally silent around me, as though holding its breath. I became acutely aware that standing still made me vulnerable. Just because the wolf hadn't killed me immediately didn't mean it wouldn't return. Perhaps it was playing with me, some cruel instinct to let fear ripen before the final strike. The thought mobilized me, forced my legs to move despite their trembling. I needed to find shelter somewhere defensible, where I could rest and think without exposure on all sides. The bound hands complicated everything, making even simple movement an exercise in frustrated awkwardness. I tried working at the knots with my teeth, but whoever had tied them knew their craft well. The rope held firm, cutting deeper into my wrists with each futile attempt. Moving deeper into the forest felt counterintuitive, but returning to the edge where the pack had abandoned me seemed even more foolish. They wouldn't welcome me back. If anything, my survival would be seen as failure, evidence that I hadn't fulfilled my purpose. Better to press forward and hope for some cave or thick copse of trees that could provide minimal protection. Music shifts to mysterious exploration theme. The terrain grew rougher as I walked, the ground sloping upward in a gradual incline that suggested I was approaching higher elevation. Ancient trees towered overhead, their canopies so dense that daylight barely penetrated. Moss covered everything here, transforming fallen logs into soft green mounds and muffling my footsteps until I moved through near total silence. It should have been peaceful. Instead, the quiet felt oppressive, a presence in itself that watched and waited. How long I walked, I couldn't guess. Time behaved strangely in this place, stretching and contracting without pattern. But eventually, the trees thinned ahead, revealing a clearing that shouldn't exist. I approached cautiously, senses alert for any sign of danger. What emerged from the undergrowth stole my breath. Ruins sprawled across the clearing, stone structures that had once been grand, now reclaimed by nature. Ivy climbed crumbling walls, and trees grew through what had been windows or doorways, their roots breaking apart foundation stones with patient inevitability. But even in decay, the architecture spoke of wealth and power. These hadn't been common buildings. The dressed stone, the careful joints, the sheer scale suggested something important had stood here. A palace, perhaps. Or a keep. I moved closer, drawn by curiosity stronger than caution. My bound hands made climbing over fallen masonry difficult, but I managed, driven by a need to understand what this place had been. The central structure was largest, its walls still partially intact despite centuries of abandonment. I could see where a great hall had stood, could trace the outline of rooms branching off from it. Whoever had lived here commanded respect and resources. It was on one of these partially standing walls that I found the first symbol. At first, it appeared to be merely decorative carving, the kind of ornamentation wealthy families commissioned to display their status. But as I studied it more closely, I recognized intent beyond aesthetics. The symbol consisted of interlocking circles, carved deep into the stone with precision that suggested ritual rather than art. Within the circles, smaller symbols nested, some I recognized from healing texts my grandmother had shown me, others completely foreign. Lunar symbols, protection runes, and something else, something that made my skin prickle with unease. I moved along the wall, finding more carvings. They told a story, though I lacked the knowledge to fully read it. A figure that could be wolf or man, surrounded by chains. A woman reaching toward the bound figure. Above them both, 3 moon phases rendered in careful detail. And beneath it all, words carved in a language that was almost familiar, but frustratingly just beyond comprehension. I traced the carvings with bound fingers, trying to decipher their meaning. The stone felt warm beneath my touch, warmer than it should given the lack of direct sunlight. Magic. The word appeared in my mind unbidden. These were not mere decorations, but active workings, spells, or wards set by someone with considerable power. Music becomes more intense. A doorway gaped in the wall ahead, leading into what had been an interior room. The roof had long since collapsed, but enough walls remained to create a sheltered space. I ducked inside, my eyes adjusting to the deeper shadows. And there, carved into what had once been an altar stone, I found the message. Unlike the other symbols, this one was written in common script, though the language felt archaic, formal in a way modern speech had abandoned. The words had been cut deep, meant to endure. And they had. Moss and lichen partially obscured the text, but I brushed it away with careful fingers, revealing the inscription beneath. Forged by treachery, bound by force, the cure dwells within the curse itself. What was stolen shall be returned when the moon recognizes her match. The words resonated with something deep in my chest, a recognition I couldn't explain. I read them again, parsing each phrase for meaning. Someone had been betrayed. Someone had been bound through force. And there was a cure, though what illness or curse it addressed remained unclear. The final line proved most cryptic. When the moon recognizes her match. More symbols surrounded the text, and these I understood better from my healing studies. I identified the glyph for wolf first, rendered in stylized form that still captured the essence of the animal. Beside it, a woman's silhouette, arms raised as though invoking or offering something. Between them, a third symbol I'd seen before in my grandmother's oldest books, always accompanied by warnings and cautious whispers. The mate bond. My breath caught. This was about mating, about the sacred connection that could form between wolves. But the configuration was wrong. Mate bonds were natural, spontaneous, requiring no ritual or magic. They simply existed, or they didn't. Yet this altar spoke of deliberate creation, or perhaps restoration of such a bond. "What is this place?" I whispered to the empty ruins. Sudden sound effect, soft footstep. The wolf appeared so silently that I didn't realize I was no longer alone until I felt the displacement of air behind me. I spun, heart leaping into my throat, expecting attack, but the massive creature simply sat at the edge of the chamber, watching me with those unsettling golden eyes. In the dimmer light, its coat appeared darker, the silver gray shading to pewter and shadow. This close, I could see details I'd missed before. Scars marked its body, old wounds that had healed into white lines through the dense fur. These were not random injuries, but the methodical cuts of weapons, evidence of battles fought and survived. Around its throat, the fur grew in an unusual pattern, as though something had once rested there, some collar or binding that had left its mark even after removal. The wolf didn't move toward me. It simply watched, head tilted slightly in what might have been curiosity, waiting. "You didn't kill me before," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Why? Why?" No response. Of course not. It was an animal. However intelligent it might seem, animals didn't speak, didn't understand human words. Yet something in the way the wolf's ears swiveled toward me, in the focus of its attention, suggested comprehension beyond instinct. I turned back to the altar, though keeping the wolf in my peripheral vision. These markings speak of betrayal and binding. Someone was forced into this form, trapped here. Is that you? Are you the cursed one? The wolf rose to its feet, and my muscles tensed for flight, despite knowing I could never outrun it. But instead of approaching, the creature moved to the opposite wall, nosing at a section of stone that appeared identical to the rest. It pawed once, twice, then looked back at me with clear intent. "You want me to look there?" The wolf's tail swished once, a gesture that felt distinctly affirmative. I approached cautiously, unsure what I would find. The stone the wolf had indicated looked solid, unremarkable. With effort, I managed to work it free, revealing a hollow space beyond. Inside, carefully wrapped in oiled cloth that had preserved it through the years, lay a book. I withdrew it with shaking hands, the weight substantial, the binding clearly expensive even after so much time. I unwrapped the cloth, revealing a leather cover tooled with more of the same symbols I'd seen throughout the ruins. When I opened it, the pages proved to be vellum, each one covered in neat script that showed the careful hand of someone accustomed to formal writing, a journal, or perhaps more accurately, a confession. The first page bore a date that made my breath catch. 20 years ago, near to the month, and beneath it, a name I recognized from pack history, though it hadn't been spoken in my lifetime. Morgana. I began to read. And with each line, the world I thought I understood crumbled further. They came for me at midnight, warriors bearing the mark of the royal house but acting under orders I knew to be false. My coven tried to protect me, but we are healers and seers, not fighters. They cut down Lila and Brea before my eyes, their blood staining the sacred circle. The beta stood over their bodies and told me I had a choice. Curse the Alpha King, or watch every member of my coven die in the same manner. The words blurred as my hands began shaking harder. I forced myself to continue reading. I am not brave enough to let them all die for principle. I agreed to his terms to forge a curse that would strip Cale Winterborn of his humanity, trap him in wolf form and drive his mind toward beast consciousness until nothing of the man remained. But I am not without resistance. Into the curse itself, I wove its antidote. The mate bond, if true and freely given, can break what I was forced to create. I leave these words, these symbols, these clues, praying someone will find them, praying the Alpha King's true mate will come, will recognize him, will choose him despite the monster he has become. The journal continued for pages, detailing the curse in technical terms I only partially understood, explaining the mechanism by which mate bonds could unravel magical compulsion. Morgana had been thorough, leaving instructions alongside her account, ensuring that whoever found this information would know how to proceed. She wrote of the curse's components: the physical transformation that locked Cale in wolf form, the mental degradation that would slowly erode his humanity, the territorial rage that would drive him to attack any who entered his domain. She explained how she'd limited the curse's reach. It worked only within the boundaries of the Forbidden Forest, which was why Cale couldn't leave, couldn't seek help, and she detailed the cure with painstaking care. The mate bond, she wrote, is the oldest magic, older than the shift itself. It cannot be forged or faked, only recognized. When true mates meet, their souls recognize each other across any barrier, even the barrier of this curse. Physical contact initiates the bond's awakening. A willing kiss completes the first stage of breaking, but the final release requires the spoken truth. The mate must claim him, must say the words that acknowledge him as hers and she as his, despite what he has become. Only then will the curse shatter completely. My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped the journal. I looked up from the pages to find the wolf watching me with an intensity that stole breath. Understanding crashed over me with the force of physical impact. This was not just any cursed creature. This was the Alpha King, the ruler who had supposedly abandoned his throne 20 years ago. Desmond had told stories of Cale Winterborn's cruelty, of his tyrannical rule that necessitated rebellion. But if this journal spoke truth, if Morgana's confession was genuine, then everything I'd been taught was lies, built upon betrayal. Cale? The name emerged as barely a whisper. The wolf's ears pricked forward, its entire body going still in a way that confirmed what I already knew. This was the Alpha King, reduced to beast form by magic wielded under threat of genocide. And Desmond the Alpha, who currently ruled, was the Beta who had orchestrated it all. The magnitude of the deception left me reeling. How many years had Desmond maintained this charade? How many wolves believed the lies about their true king? And more pressing, more dangerous, what would Desmond do if he learned the truth might be discovered? Cale moved closer, and this time I didn't flinch away. He lowered his massive head, bringing his muzzle near my bound wrists. For a heartbeat, I thought he meant to bite, to free me through violence. Instead, he caught the rope between careful teeth and began to work at the knots with surprising dexterity. It took several minutes, but eventually the rope fell away, leaving my wrists raw and marked but free. I rubbed them, wincing at the sting, grateful beyond words for the return of full movement. "Thank you," I breathed. Kale stepped back, sitting again, watching me with those golden eyes that held so much trapped intelligence. How long had he been like this? 20 years. If Morgana's journal was accurate, 20 years trapped as a beast. His mind slowly eroding, unable to communicate, unable to explain what had been done to him. My heart ached for him in a way I didn't fully understand. "The journal says the mate bond can break the curse," I said slowly, thinking aloud. "It says true mates will recognize each other. Is that why you didn't kill me?" "Oh, I said true mates. Is that why you didn't kill me?" Kale's eyes narrowed slightly, his head tilting in that now familiar gesture of attention. "Am I?" I struggled to form the question, the implications too vast to fully grasp. "Am I your mate?" The wolf rose to its feet and moved closer, closing the distance between us until he stood barely an arm's length away. Up close, he was even more imposing. His shoulder came to my chest height, his massive head level with mine. The scent of him filled my senses, pine and musk and something uniquely wild that called to my wolf in a way nothing ever had. My wolf, the part of me that could shift and run beneath the moon, stirred for the first time in years. As an Omega, my wolf was small, weak, rarely surfacing except during the forced shifts at full moon. But now she pressed against my consciousness, eager and excited in a way I'd never experienced. She recognized him. My wolf knew her mate, which meant my human self had to accept what seemed impossible. "I'm an Omega," I whispered, voicing the objection that thundered in my mind. "You're an Alpha King. We can't. That's not how mate bonds work. Alphas pair with alphas, or sometimes betas, never Omegas, never." But even as I spoke, I knew I was wrong. The moon goddess chose matches according to her own wisdom, and sometimes rarely, but sometimes she paired opposites. The ultimate alpha with the lowest omega, a balance. Kale made that rumbling sound again, deep in his chest. And this time I recognized it for what it was. Not aggression, but something closer to contentment. He moved his head forward, pressing his forehead against my shoulder in a gesture of trust and vulnerability. The physical contact sent a jolt through my entire body. Heat bloomed where his fur touched my skin, spreading outward in waves that had nothing to do with temperature. My wolf surged forward, pressing against my consciousness with desperate need. I felt the mate bond snap into place, not gently, but with the force of recognition that had waited lifetimes to occur. Mine. The thought echoed from somewhere deep in my soul. He is mine, and more terrifying, I am his. I raised trembling hands and placed them on either side of Kale's massive head, my fingers sinking into the thick fur. His eyes closed, a shudder running through his powerful frame. "I don't understand this," I admitted, my voice shaking. "I don't understand how I can feel this way about someone I've never met. Someone who's trapped in this form. But my wolf knows you. She's known you from the moment we met. And I swallowed hard. I think my soul knows you too." Kale opened his eyes, and I saw something there that made my breath catch. Hope. Desperate, fragile hope that he might finally be free. The journal says physical contact initiates the bond's awakening. I recalled Morgana's words. A willing kiss completes the first stage of breaking. A kiss. How did one kiss a wolf? But even as the question formed, I understood. This wasn't about the physical form, it was about intent. About the willingness to accept the mate bond despite circumstances. The magic would understand. I leaned forward slowly, giving Kyle every opportunity to pull away. He remained still, waiting, trusting. I pressed my lips to the top of his head, between his ears, where the fur was softest. The world exploded into sensation. Light burst from where we touched, golden and silver intertwining, the colors of moon and sun combined. I felt the curse writhing, fighting against the intrusion of mate bond magic. It was stronger than I'd expected. Morgana had woven it with terrible skill, layers upon layers of compulsion and binding. But the mate bond was older, primal, unbreakable, primal. The light intensified, forcing me to squeeze my eyes shut. I felt Kyle shudder beneath my hands, heard a sound that was half growl, half cry of pain. The curse wasn't releasing easily. It was being torn away, piece by piece, each layer peeling back with agonizing slowness. Then, between one breath and the next, everything went still. I opened my eyes. Where the massive wolf had stood, a man now knelt before me. He was beautiful in the way dangerous things are beautiful, all sharp edges and barely restrained power. Dark hair fell past his shoulders, the same silver black as his wolf form, streaked with gray at the temples. His face was angular, aristocratic, with high cheekbones and a strong jaw shadowed with stubble. Scars marked his skin, pale lines crossing his chest and arms, evidence of the battles he'd fought in human form before the curse took that form from him. But it was his eyes that held me transfixed. Still, that impossible gold, burning with an intensity that seemed to see straight through to my soul. He was also completely naked, I realized with a flush of embarrassment. Though he seemed unconcerned, he remained kneeling, looking up at me with an expression that held wonder and disbelief in equal measure. "You're real," he said, his voice rough from disuse, deeper than I'd expected. I thought, 20 years of hoping, and I'd begun to believe you were just another dream. His words sent a shiver through me. He'd been waiting for me. For 20 years, trapped and alone. He'd been waiting for his mate to find him. "I'm Nyla," I managed, my voice embarrassingly breathless. "I know." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I scented you the moment you entered the forest. Your wolf called to mine. Even through the curse." He paused, his gaze dropping to where my wrists still bore rope marks. "They hurt you." It wasn't a question, and the way his eyes darkened with rage made my pulse quicken for entirely different reasons than fear. "They sacrificed me," I said simply, "to appease the monster in the forest, and instead you found your mate." Kyle rose fluidly to his feet, and I had to continue 1529. Tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. He was tall, powerfully built, every inch the Alpha King. The moon goddess has a cruel sense of irony, or a perfect one, I countered. "If they hadn't sent me here, I would never have found you. The curse would never have been broken." Something flickered in his expression, gratitude, mixed with pain so deep it made my chest ache. He reached out slowly, giving me time to refuse, and cupped my face with hands that trembled slightly, despite their obvious strength. 20 years, he breathed. 20 years I've been trapped in that form, my mind fragmenting more each day, the beast growing stronger while the man grew weaker. I've killed Nyla. The warriors your pack sent into these woods, I couldn't control it. The curse made me territorial, aggressive. I tried to resist, but it wasn't your fault, I said firmly. You were cursed. Forced into that form against your will. Your pack doesn't know that. They think I'm a monster who chose this. His thumb traced my cheekbone with devastating gentleness. And now my mate is one of them, an omega they deemed worthless enough to sacrifice. The bitterness in his voice resonated with my own feelings about the pack that had never valued me. I'm not one of them, I said quietly. I never was. They made that clear my entire life. Kyle's eyes searched mine, reading truths I'd never spoken aloud. And somehow, standing in the ruins of his former home with this man who should have been a stranger but felt like coming home, I did. I told him about my mother's death when I was 7, about my father's remarriage to Giselle barely a year later, about growing up as the unwanted stepdaughter, the Omega who was only useful for her healing knowledge, about Verna, who tried but was too afraid to truly stand up for me. I told him about this morning the announcement of my sacrifice, the binding ceremony. Kyle listened without interruption, but I felt his rage building with each word, saw it in the tension of his jaw, the white-knuckle grip he maintained on his control. Desmond, he said when I finished, the name a curse on his lips. My beta. The wolf I trusted above all others. He released me, pacing away with restless energy that spoke of violence barely contained. He orchestrated all of this. The curse. The coup. The lies he's told about me for 20 years. And now he sends you to die, never knowing he was delivering my salvation. What will you do? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Kyle turned back to me, and in his eyes I saw the Alpha King, the ruler who had commanded loyalty and respect, who had been betrayed and stolen from. I will take back what is mine. My throne, my pack, my life. They won't believe you, I warned. 20 years of Desmond's lies have convinced them you were a tyrant who abandoned them. They'll see you as a threat. Then I'll have to prove otherwise. He moved back to me, taking my hands in his. But not today. Today I'm still recovering my strength, my humanity. The curse may be broken, but its effects linger. And more importantly, his expression softened. Today, I want to know my mate. Really know her. Not just the brave woman who walked into certain death without breaking. The intensity of his focus made me feel seen in a way I'd never experienced. Not as an Omega, I do an offended, aspiens tuer, not as a sacrifice, but as myself as Nyla, who apparently mattered enough to the moon goddess to be matched with an Alpha King. I don't know how to be anyone's mate, I admitted. There was never anyone who looked at me the way you're looking at me now. Good, Kale said with surprising fierceness. Because you're mine, and I don't share. The possessiveness should have been alarming. Instead, it sent heat pooling low in my belly, made my wolf preen with satisfaction. The journal mentioned more steps to fully break the curse, I said, trying to regain some equilibrium. Physical contact initiated it. The kiss completed the first stage, but there's still the claiming. Kale finished. You have to claim me as yours. Speak the words that bind us formally, and I have to claim you in return. His eyes darkened with something that was definitely not appropriate for a first meeting. That particular ritual is quite involved. My cheeks flamed. Oh, we have time, he assured me, though his voice had gone rough again. I won't rush you into something you're not ready for. Mate, bond or not, you've been through enough today. The consideration, the care he was showing despite obviously wanting me, made my heart do strange things in my chest. I need clothes, Kyle said abruptly, glancing down at himself with wry amusement. 2 decades as a wolf, and I'd forgotten how impractical human nudity is. I laughed despite everything, despite the terror of this morning, the impossibility of this situation, the uncertainty of what came next. The sound surprised me, as much as it seemed to surprise him. Kale smiled a real smile that transformed his face from harsh to breathtaking. I like your laugh. Let me hear it more often. Find clothes first, I managed, still blushing. Then, maybe. We searched the ruins together, and I marveled at how natural it felt to move in tandem with him, to anticipate his movements and have him anticipate mine. The mate bond was growing stronger by the minute, weaving us together with invisible threads. In what had once been a bedchamber, we found an old trunk that had somehow survived the decades. Inside, wrapped in waxed cloth that had protected them from moisture and decay, were clothes that must have belonged to Kale before the curse. He dressed quickly in trousers and a shirt that had once been fine, but now bore the mustiness of long storage. They still fit, though more tightly than they probably had 20 years ago. He'd clearly maintained his warrior's physique, even in wolf form. Better? He asked, catching me watching. Different, I admitted. Less distracting. His eyes gleamed with knowing amusement. Liar. I can scent your attraction, little Omega. The mate bond goes both ways. Stop that, I muttered, mortified that he could literally smell my reaction to him. Never. But his expression sobered as he looked around the ruins. This was my home once, the heart of the kingdom. Desmond didn't just curse me. He let everything I built fall into decay. We'll rebuild it, I said impulsively. When you reclaim your throne, we'll restore this place. We, Kyle repeated softly, testing the word. I liked the sound of that. We, he crossed to me, pulling me into an embrace that should have been presumptuous, but felt right. I relaxed into his chest, breathing in his scent, letting the mate bond settle around us like a warm blanket. I need to tell you something, Kale said after a moment, about what comes next. Confronting Desmond won't be easy. He's had 20 years to consolidate power, to build loyalty. Some of those who follow him do so because they believe his lies. But others, he paused, choosing words carefully. Others know the truth and choose him anyway. They'll fight to keep me from returning. Then we fight back, I said simply. You don't have to. I do. I pulled back enough to look up at him. You're my mate. That means your battles are my battles. Besides, I added with more bitterness than I'd intended, I have my own score to settle with Desmond and the pack that threw me away. Kale's eyes flashed with approval and possessive satisfaction. My fierce little Omega. I'm not little, I protested, just because you're abnormally tall. He silenced me with a kiss, and this time there was nothing gentle about it. The mate bond flared between us, hot and urgent, pushing us toward completion. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kyle rested his forehead against mine. We should stop, he said, though his hands tightened on my waist. You deserve better than ruins for your claiming. I don't care about the setting, I breathed. I do. He stepped back, visibly restraining himself. You'll have everything you deserve, Nyla, including a proper claiming ceremony when the time is right. The romance of it, the sheer consideration, made me fall a little more in love with this man I just met. Love. The word should have terrified me. Instead, it felt inevitable. So what do we do now? I asked, trying to focus on practical matters instead of the way I wanted to pull him back to me. Now, Kale said, his expression hardening into something that reminded me he was an alpha king. We plan. Desmond expects you to be dead, expects the beast to be satisfied with his sacrifice. We'll use that. Let him think he succeeded. Meanwhile, we gather information, identify allies, and prepare for the moment when I reveal myself. How long will that take? Days, maybe a week. He pulled me back into his arms, as though he couldn't bear not touching me. I know it's not ideal staying hidden when every instinct screams to march into the pack center and rip out Desmond's throat. But we need strategy, not just strength. Desmond didn't hold power for 20 years by being stupid. I nodded against his chest. And in the meantime, Kale's voice dropped to something intimate. I get to know everything about my mate. What makes you smile? What makes you angry? What you dream about when you let yourself dream. That sounds nice, I admitted. It will be more than nice, he promised. It will be everything. The first 3 days in the forest passed in a strange combination of domestic tranquility and strategic planning. Kyle couldn't leave the forest yet, even with the curse broken. He needed time to fully recover his strength and humanity. 20 years in wolf form had left his body, remembering that shape more easily than his human one. He tired quickly at first, needed more sleep than he wanted to admit, and occasionally his eyes would flash gold with wolf instinct before he pulled himself back. I stayed with him, of course. Where else would I go? The pack that had sacrificed me? The family that had never wanted me? Besides, the mate bond made separation physically uncomfortable. The further apart we were, the more both of us felt the pull to return to each other. So I remained in the ruins, helping Kale rebuild his humanity one day at a time. We made a shelter in one of the more intact rooms, gathering blankets and supplies from various hiding spots throughout the ruins, places where Kale in wolf form had instinctively stashed things over the years. It wasn't much, but it was ours, and slowly, carefully, we learned each other. I discovered that Kyle had a dry sense of humor, that he loved strategy games, and had once been known for his skill at chess, that he'd been 25 when cursed, which made him 45 now. Though he looked younger, shifter aging slowed after maturity, that his favorite food was venison, he hated mushrooms, and he'd once had a sister who died in childbirth, which was why he'd been so protective of pregnant wolves in his pack. He learned that I had a gift for healing, that I could identify herbs by scent alone, and that I sang when I thought no one was listening. That I'd never shifted voluntarily before meeting him. My wolf had been too weak, too suppressed by my omega status. That I was terrified of storms because one had killed my mother, and that I dreamed sometimes of traveling beyond packlands to see the ocean. I'll take you there, Kyle promised one evening as we sat by the fire he'd built. When this is over, when I've reclaimed what's mine, I'll take you to see the ocean. We'll stand on the shore and listen to the waves, and you'll know what freedom feels like. Tell me about your kingdom, I said, curling against his side. What it was like before. His arm tightened around me. Prosperous. We had alliances with 3 neighboring packs, trade agreements that kept everyone fed and protected. I focused on education, on healing arts, on making sure even Omegas had paths to respect beyond servitude. That's why Desmond feared you, I realized. You were changing the power structures, making rank matter less. Perhaps. Kale's expression darkened. Desmond always believed in traditional hierarchies. Alphas at the top, betas serving them, omegas at the bottom. He thought my reforms were weakness, that equality would destroy us. I think he convinced himself that cursing me was for the good of the pack. One sat away hiv, one sat away hiv, one sat away hiv hind, one sat away hiv hind, one sat away hiv hind, one sat away hiv hind. That's what Desmond said when they sent me here, I remembered bitterly. For the good of the pack. It's always for the good of the pack when they want you to sacrifice yourself, Kale said. Never mind whether it's actually good, or just convenient for those in power. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the fire crackling between us. We need to make contact with someone in the pack, Kyle said eventually. Someone who might remember me, who might question Desmond's rule. Do you know anyone like that? I thought carefully. There's Marcus, one of the older warriors. He would have been young when you were cursed, but old enough to remember. He always seemed sad somehow, like he was serving out of duty rather than loyalty. Marcus. Kyle's eyes sharpened with memory. Red-brown wolf? Scar across his muzzle? Scar? Yes. You remember him? He was barely 20 when I was cursed. Enthusiastic, brave, wanted to prove himself. If he's grown disillusioned with Desmond, he might be an ally. Anyone else? Elena, the healer. She's old enough to have known you as well. She taught me some of what I know about herbs. I paused. She always seemed careful around Desmond, like she didn't quite trust him. Elena. Kale smiled. She was already ancient when I knew her, stubborn as stone and twice as immovable. If she's still alive, she's seen everything Desmond has done. Yes, she might help. So how do we contact them without alerting Desmond? Kyle considered this. You'll have to do it carefully. Return to pack lands. No. The word came out sharper than I'd intended. I'm not leaving you. Nyla, the mate bond. Remember? Being apart hurts. And besides, what's my excuse for being alive? They think I'm dead. If I show up, Desmond will know something went wrong. Kale cursed under his breath, knowing I was right. What if they came to us? I suggested. What if we sent a message that would reach only those we trust? How? I thought about it, turning the problem over in my mind. Elena comes into the forest sometimes, just to the edge, to gather herbs that only grow here. She's careful, never goes deep, but if we left something where she'd find it. A message, Kyle finished. Something only she would understand. Exactly. And maybe Marcus too. He leads hunting parties sometimes. If we were careful, strategic, we could contact them individually without Desmond knowing. Kale pulled me closer, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. Clever, mate. We still have to be careful, I warned. If Desmond even suspects, I know. His voice went hard. Which is why we wait until I'm at full strength. Another few days, and I'll be ready. Then we make our move. Music transitions to tension-building theme. On the fourth day, Kyle shifted for the first time since the curse broke. I watched, fascinated and awed, as his body changed. It was smoother than I'd expected, more natural. One moment he stood before me in human form. The next his wolf stood in the same space, massive and silver black, those golden eyes bright with intelligence. But this time, when he looked at me, I saw recognition without the curse's taint. This was Kyle in his wolf form, fully himself, fully in control. He padded toward me, and I sank my fingers into his fur without fear. Still you, I murmured. Still my mate. He nuzzled against me, that rumbling sound of contentment vibrating through his chest. Then he surprised me by gently catching my hand in his mouth, not biting, just holding and tugging. You want me to shift too? I guessed. His tail wagged once in affirmation. I'd never voluntarily shifted before. The few times I'd managed it had been during forced full moon shifts, and even then my wolf was small, weak, barely worth noticing. The idea of shifting now, of showing Kale just how inadequate my wolf was compared to his magnificent beast, made anxiety curl in my stomach. I'm just an omega, I said softly. My wolf is. She's not much to look at. My wolf. She's not much to look at. Kale shifted back to human form, the change so quick it made me blink. Your wolf is part of you, which means she's perfect. Show me, Nyla. Trust me with all of yourself. The sincerity in his eyes, the absolute acceptance, gave me courage I'd never had before. I closed my eyes and reached for my wolf. She rose to meet me eagerly, more excited than she'd ever been. The shift came easier than it ever had before. The mate bond seemed to strengthen everything about me, including this. When I opened my eyes again, the world looked different, sharper, more colorful. I could smell everything, the decay of old wood, the freshness of pine, the musk of Kale's wolf. And underneath it all, the mate bond itself, a golden thread connecting us. I looked down at myself. My wolf was small, yes, even for an omega. My fur was chestnut brown, plain and unremarkable. Nothing like Kale's magnificent silver-black coat. Before I could feel too self-conscious, Kyle shifted back into his wolf form. He circled me once, then bumped his head against my shoulder in a gesture of approval and affection. And just like that, my insecurity melted away. It didn't matter that I was small or plain. I was his mate. And to him, that made me perfect. We ran together through the forest, Kale keeping pace with my smaller stride. And for the first time in my life, I felt the pure joy of shifting. This was what it should have been all along: freedom and power and connection. The mate bond sang between us, two wolves moving as one. When we finally returned to the ruins, both breathless and exhilarated, Kale shifted back and pulled me into his arms the moment I shifted too. Beautiful, he said fiercely. Your wolf is beautiful, Nyla. Small, yes, but graceful, quick. And those eyes amber like honey in sunlight. Perfect, I buried my face in his chest, overwhelmed by emotion. No one had ever called me beautiful before. No one had ever looked at my wolf with anything but disappointment. "Thank you," I whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me. The real me. Not the Omega everyone dismissed, but me." Kyle tilted my face up, his expression intense. "I will always see you, Nyla. Every part of you. And I will spend the rest of our lives making sure you know your worth." The kiss that followed was tender and deep, full of promise and passion in equal measure. The mate bond flared between us, pushing us toward completion. But Kyle maintained control, pulling back before we went too far. "Soon," he promised, his voice rough. "When we've dealt with Desmond, when you're safe and we can claim each other properly, I want nothing hanging over us. When we complete the bond." I nodded, understanding even as my body protested the delay. He was right, we needed to resolve the threat of Desmond first. "Tomorrow," Kyle said, "we leave the message for Elena, and then we prepare for war." The message we left for Elena was simple. A bundle of moonflower and nightshade, bound with red thread in a specific pattern that Kale remembered as her personal mark. Alongside it, we placed a note written in code symbols from healing texts that only someone with Elena's knowledge would recognize. "Meet at the Old Oak, midnight, full moon. Trust no one." A ghost from the past. We left it where Elena would find it during her herb gathering, then retreated deeper into the forest to wait. "What if she doesn't come?" I asked as we kept watch from a hidden vantage point. "She'll come," Kale said with confidence. "Elena is curious by nature, and she knows that code. She'll want to understand what this means." He was right. 2 days later, under the light of the full moon, a figure approached the old oak at the forest's edge. An elderly woman moving with surprising stealth for someone who had to be nearly 80. Elena paused at the tree, her head tilted as though listening to the forest itself. "I'm here," she called softly. "Show yourself, ghost." Kyle stepped from the shadows, and I watched Elena's face cycle through shock, disbelief, and finally wonder. "By the moon goddess," she breathed. "Kale Winterborn, you're alive. You're human." "Thanks to my mate," Kyle said, and gestured for me to join him. Elena's eyes widened further when she saw me. "Nyla? Child? They said you were dead. They held a memorial. They sacrificed me to the beast," I said flatly. "Except the beast was the Alpha King under a curse, and I'm his mate." Elena sank down onto a fallen log as though her legs wouldn't support her. "Tell me everything." We did. We told her about Morgana's journal, about the curse and how Desmond had orchestrated it, about the mate bond breaking the curse, about our plans to reclaim the throne. Elena listened without interruption, her expression growing darker with each revelation. When we finished, she sat in silence for a long moment. Then, I always suspected, she said quietly. Little things that never made sense. The way Desmond avoided questions about Kale's disappearance. The way he punished anyone who spoke favorably of the old Alpha King. The convenient timing of it all right when Kale was implementing reforms that threatened traditional power structures. "You never said anything," Kyle observed. "Who would I tell? Desmond controls everything. The warriors, the council, the narrative itself." Elena looked up at him with fierce determination. "But now you're back. Now we have a chance to set things right. We need allies," I said. "People who remember Kale, who might question Desmond's rule." "Marcus," Elena said immediately. "He's grown disillusioned. Desmond sent him on increasingly dangerous missions, I think trying to get him killed. He survived out of pure stubbornness, but he questions orders now. Carefully, but he questions. I, close Doffermai. Who else?" Kale asked, Sasha, one of the younger warriors. She's only 23, too young to remember you, but she's smart and she hates the way Omegas are treated. I think she'd support reforms. Elena paused, thinking. Thomas, the smith. He's quiet, but observant. And Lyra, she runs the orphanage. Desmond cut funding 3 years ago, and she's never forgiven him. That's 5 potential allies, I counted. Not much against Desmond's entire force. We don't need an army, Kyle said. We need witnesses. People who can verify my identity. Who will stand with me when I challenge Desmond publicly. The pack will follow strength and legitimacy. If we can prove I'm the true Alpha King, that I was cursed rather than abandoning them, many will turn. And those who won't? Elena asked. Kale's expression hardened. Will be dealt with. Over the next week, Elena carefully approached each potential ally, testing their loyalty, gauging their reactions to careful questions about the past. It was delicate work, one wrong word to the wrong person, and Desmond would know something was happening. But Elena was skilled at subterfuge, and slowly, one by one, our allies agreed to meet. The gathering happened deep in the forest, in the ruins that had once been Kale's home. 6 wolves besides me and Kale, Elena, Marcus, Sasha, Thomas, Lyra, and surprisingly, my half-sister Verna, who Elena had determined could be trusted. Verna had gasped when she saw me, tears streaming down her face as she threw herself into my arms. I thought you were dead. I thought I'd never see you again. Mother said we couldn't speak of you, that you'd served your purpose. But I couldn't stop thinking, I'm okay, I assured her, holding her tight. I'm more than okay. I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. When Verna saw Kyle, her eyes went wide, but she didn't run. Instead, she dropped into a respectful bow, the bow one gave to an Alpha King, not a common Alpha. The old texts in the archives, she said quietly. I've been researching since Nyla died. The drawings of the Alpha King look like you, and the stories about his disappearance never quite made sense. Intelligent girl, Kale said approvingly. You'll go far. He explained everything to the assembled group, the curse, the betrayal, the truth of what Desmond had done. And he demonstrated his alpha power, the sheer force of his presence that marked him as royal born. One by one, they bent the knee, acknowledging him as their true Alpha King. What do you need from us? Marcus asked, speaking for the group. Witness my challenge, Kale said. When I confront Desmond publicly, stand with me. Verify my identity. Support my claim to the throne. The rest of the pack will follow leadership. If we can prove I'm legitimate, many will turn from Desmond. He won't go quietly, Thomas warned. He's had 20 years to build his power base. He'll fight. I'm counting on it, Kale said grimly. This ends in blood or submission. Desmond's choice. When? Sasha asked, her hand resting on the sword at her hip. Kyle looked at me, and I saw the question in his eyes. We'd been delaying the final step, the claiming ceremony that would complete our mate bond fully. We'd been waiting for safety, for the right moment. But perhaps the right moment was now. Perhaps we needed to be at full strength, fully bonded, before facing Desmond. 2 days, Kale decided. The claiming ceremony first, to complete our bond. Then we challenge Desmond at the next pack gathering. The new moon, Lyra noted. When Desmond holds his monthly address to the pack, everyone will be there. Perfect. Kale smiled, and it was not a kind expression. Desmond wanted to sacrifice under the full moon. I'll give him a reckoning under the new moon. The meeting dissolved after that, our allies slipping back to pack lands individually to avoid suspicion. Only Verna lingered. I'm proud of you, she told me quietly. For surviving. For finding your mate. For being brave enough to come back and fight. Will you be safe? I asked, worried. If Mother finds out you met with us. She won't, Verna said firmly. I'm smarter than she thinks. And besides, she added with a small smile, I've been planning to leave anyway. Once you're Luna Queen, I'll finally have somewhere to go. Luna Queen, I repeated, the title feeling foreign. That's not me. I'm just the Omega who walked into death and came out mated to an Alpha King. Verna interrupted. Just the woman who helped break a 20-year curse. Just my brave, incredible sister who deserves everything good the moon goddess can give her. She hugged me tight. You are Luna Queen, Nyla. Start believing it. After she left, Kyle found me standing alone in the ruins, looking up at the moon. Doubts? He asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind. Fears, I admitted. What if I'm not enough? What if I fail you? Impossible. He turned me to face him. You already broke an ancient curse. With nothing but your presence and your love. You've already proven yourself strong enough. The only question is whether I'm worthy of you. You are, I said without hesitation. Then trust that you're worthy of me. He kissed my forehead. In 2 days, we complete the bond. And then, together, we take back what was stolen. Are you ready? I thought about everything that had led to this moment. The sacrifice that wasn't, the monster who was a mate, the curse that became a blessing. I thought about the pack that had thrown me away, and the man who had chosen me, who saw worth where others saw only weakness. I'm ready, I said, and I meant it. The claiming ceremony began at moonrise. We'd prepared the great hall of the ruins as best we could, clearing debris and laying fresh pine boughs across the floor. Elena had helped gather the traditional herbs, moonflower for blessing, sage for purification, lavender for love. Candles provided light, their flames dancing in the evening breeze. It wasn't the grand ceremony an Alpha King and his Luna Queen deserved, but it was ours, and that made it perfect. Kyle had cleaned up as well as possible given our limited resources. His hair was pulled back, his face freshly shaven, and he wore the finest clothes we'd found in the trunk's formal attire befitting royalty, even if time-worn. I wore a simple dress that Elena had brought from her stores, soft white cotton that flowed around me like moonlight. She'd woven flowers into my braided hair, and around my neck I wore the only jewelry we'd found intact in the ruins, a silver chain with a pendant bearing the royal crest. You're beautiful, Kale said when he saw me, his voice rough with emotion. My Luna. My queen. My mate. Yours. I agreed. Completely yours. We'd asked Elena to officiate, to speak the traditional words that bound mates before witnesses. But there were no witnesses tonight except the moon goddess herself, watching through the open ceiling above. We begin, Elena said, her voice carrying through the ruined hall. The ceremony was ancient, its words unchanged for generations. Elena spoke of the mate bond, of its sacred nature, of the gift the moon goddess gave to those she deemed perfect matches. She blessed us with sage smoke, anointed our foreheads with oil infused with moonflower. And then came the vows. Kale Winterborn, Alpha King of the Silver Moon Pack. Elena intoned. Do you claim this woman as your mate, your Luna, your equal in all things? Do you pledge your strength to protect her, your wisdom to guide your pack together, your heart to love her above all others? I do, Kyle said, his golden eyes never leaving mine. I claim Nyla as my mate, my Luna, my equal. I pledge my strength, my wisdom, my heart. She is mine as I am hers. From this day until the moon calls us home. Elena turned to me. Nyla, Omega of the Silver Moon Pack, soon to be Luna Queen. Do you claim this man as your mate, your Alpha King, your equal in all things? Do you pledge your compassion to heal him, your courage to stand beside him, your heart to love him above all others? My voice came out stronger than I'd expected. I do. I claim Kyle as my mate, my Alpha King, my equal. I pledge my compassion, my courage, my heart. He is mine as I am his. From this day, until the moon calls us home. Then, by the power vested in me by the moon goddess and the ancient laws of our kind, Elena said, I declare you mated, bound by soul and heart and blood. What the goddess has joined, let no one tear asunder. The mate bond flared between us, visible for a moment as golden light that wrapped around both our forms, binding us together in ways that went beyond physical. I felt Kale's emotions as my own, his love, his desire, his absolute certainty that I was his destiny, and I knew he felt mine in return. Elena quietly withdrew, leaving us alone in the candlelit hall. Kyle moved toward me with predatory grace, his eyes glowing gold with barely restrained hunger. My mate, he said, the words a possessive growl. Mine. Yours. I agreed, my voice breathy. Show me. Claim me properly. He was on me in an instant, his mouth claiming mine in a kiss that left no doubt about his intentions. The mate bond sang between us, urging us toward completion, toward the final step that would seal us together forever. Kale's hands moved to the laces of my dress, his fingers surprisingly gentle despite the urgency I felt in him. Tell me if you want to stop, he said against my lips. At any point. I won't. I silenced him with another kiss, pouring everything I felt into it. Don't stop. I want this. I want you. The dress fell away, pooling at my feet. Continue 08. 1. Kyle pulled back just enough to look at me, and the reverence in his expression made my heart clench. Perfect, he breathed. Every part of you is perfect. He shed his own clothes quickly, and then there was nothing between us. Skin to skin, heart to heart, the mate bond amplifying every sensation until I could barely think. We sank down onto the pine boughs, the scent of them mixing with lavender, and our own combined scent, the scent of mates finally coming together. Kale took his time, worshipping every inch of my skin with his hands and mouth, learning what made me gasp, what made me arch into him. When I was trembling and desperate, he finally positioned himself above me. Last chance, he said, though his voice shook with the effort of restraint. Once we do this, you're mine forever. No going back. I don't want to go back, I said fiercely. I only want forward. With you. He entered me slowly, carefully, mindful of my inexperience. There was a moment of discomfort, a brief sting, and then nothing but fullness and rightness and the overwhelming sense of completion. Nyla. Kale groaned, his forehead pressed to mine. My mate, my Luna. My everything. My everything. We moved together, finding our rhythm, and the mate bond flared brighter with each moment. I felt his pleasure as my own, knew he felt mine, creating a feedback loop that spiraled higher and higher. When we reached the peak together, the bond completed with an audible snap, golden light exploding outward from where we joined, washing over us in waves of pure magic. I felt Kyle fully then, his soul intertwined with mine in ways I couldn't articulate. We were separate still, but also one. Two halves of a whole, perfectly balanced. Kyle collapsed beside me, pulling me into his arms, both of us breathing hard. That was... I couldn't find words adequate to describe what we'd just shared. Everything. Kyle finished. That was everything. He pressed a kiss to my temple. You're officially Luna Queen now. How does it feel? I considered the question, taking inventory of myself. The mate bond thrummed between us, strong and unbreakable. My wolf purred with satisfaction, fully content for the first time in my life. And beneath it all, I felt a new strength, not physical, but something deeper. The strength that came from being truly seen, truly loved, truly valued. It feels like coming home, I said finally. Like I've been wandering my whole life, and finally found where I belong. You belong with me, Kyle said fiercely. Always with me. We lay together in comfortable silence, wrapped in each other and in the afterglow of completed bonding. Tomorrow would bring challenges confronting Desmond, reclaiming the throne, facing those who would resist change. But tonight was ours, sacred and perfect. Eventually, Kyle spoke again. Tomorrow night is the new moon. Desmond's gathering. Are you ready for what comes next? I thought about the frightened Omega girl who'd walked into the forest expecting death just days ago. She seemed like a different person, someone from another lifetime. I thought about who I was now, Luna Queen, mate to an Alpha King, stronger than I'd ever imagined possible. I'm ready, I said. Let's take back your throne. The pack gathering took place in the same square where I'd been bound and sentenced to death. Desmond stood in the center, addressing the assembled wolves with practiced authority. He spoke of the pack's prosperity, of their safety now that the beast had been appeased, of his wise leadership. He spoke lies with the confidence of someone who'd never been challenged. We waited at the edge of the square, hidden in the shadows. Our allies were positioned throughout the crowd: Marcus, Sasha, Thomas, Lyra, and Verna, all ready to act when the moment came. Kyle squeezed my hand. Last chance to stay behind, he said quietly. This could get violent. We're in this together. I reminded him. Equal partners. Equal rulers. I'm not hiding while you face him alone. Pride flashed in his eyes, followed by fierce love. My fearless Luna. In love. Now? I asked. Now. We stepped from the shadows and into the square. The reaction was immediate. Gasps rippled through the crowd as people recognized me, Nyla, who should be dead. And beside me, a stranger who radiated power like heat from a fire. Desmond's head snapped around, his eyes widening with shock that quickly turned to calculation and fear. Impossible, he breathed. You're dead. The beast. The beast? Kale said, his voice carrying across the square with alpha command, was me. Kale Winterborn, your true Alpha King, cursed by your treachery and returned to claim what you stole. Silence fell like a physical blow. Wolves stared in disbelief, looking between Desmond and Kale, trying to reconcile what they were seeing with what they'd been told for 20 years. Desmond recovered quickly, his expression shifting to scornful dismissal. This is madness. Kyle Winterborn abandoned us decades ago. This is some imposter. Some trick. No trick. Elena stepped forward from the crowd. I knew Kale Winterborn. Treated his injuries, witnessed his rule. This is him. Return to us. As do I, Marcus added, moving to stand beside Elena. I served under King KL. I recognize my true alpha. One by one, our allies revealed themselves, standing together against Desmond's lies. Sasha, I've heard the old stories, the true ones, about a king who cared for his people, who reformed our laws to protect the weak. Thomas, I found records in the forge, orders from the old king that Desmond tried to destroy. Orders that showed wisdom and compassion. Lyra, the orphans remember. We passed down stories of the king who ensured no child went hungry, who built our home. Desmond cut that funding. Verna, the archives hold truth. I've read them. This man is who he claims to be. Desmond's face twisted with rage. Traitors, all of you. I am Alpha here. I've ruled for 20 years. You've squatted on a throne you stole. Kale interrupted, his voice cold. You cursed your king, murdered innocents, and ruled through fear and lies. I challenge you, Desmond, here and now. Alpha to Alpha. The pack will recognize the victor as their true leader. An Alpha challenge, the most sacred law of our kind. Desmond's eyes darted around the square, looking for support, for escape. Even his most loyal warriors were watching with uncertainty now, questioning everything they'd been told. "Very well," Desmond snarled. "I accept your challenge, imposter. When I kill you, all doubt will be erased." The crowd parted, creating a circle. Kael and Desmond faced each other across the packed earth. "This ends tonight," Kael said quietly. "Your reign of lies ends tonight." They shifted simultaneously, Desmond into a large gray wolf, formidable and battle-scarred. Kael into his massive silver-black form, twice Desmond's size and radiating power that made every wolf in the square feel the pull of submission. The fight was brutal and swift. Desmond attacked first, going for Kael's throat with desperate ferocity. But 20 years in wolf form had given Kael advantages Desmond couldn't match. He moved with fluid grace, dodging easily, retaliating with precise strikes that drew blood and weakened his opponent. I watched with my heart in my throat, the mate bond making me feel every impact Kael took. But Kael was winning. It was clear within minutes. Desmond was strong, experienced, but Kael was stronger, more skilled, and most importantly, fighting for something more than just power. He was fighting for justice, for truth, for the mate who had broken his curse and stood beside him. The final blow came quickly. Kael caught Desmond by the throat, his jaws closing with finality. He held there for a long moment, long enough to ensure submission, to show dominance, to prove beyond any doubt who the true alpha was. Then he released, stepping back as Desmond shifted back to human form, bloodied and beaten. "I submit," Desmond gasped, the formal words of surrender. "You are alpha. You are king." Kael shifted back as well, standing tall over his defeated enemy. "You orchestrated the curse that bound me. You murdered Morgana's coven. You ruled through lies and fear. You will face justice for these crimes." He turned to face the assembled pack. "I am Kael Winterborn, your Alpha King, returned to you. And I will rule with the mate the moon goddess gave me, Nyla, your Luna Queen." He held out his hand to me, and I stepped forward to take it, moving to stand beside him. Together, we faced the pack, and one by one, starting with our allies and spreading through the crowd, wolves bent the knee in acknowledgement of their true king and queen. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of the restored palace, watching the sun set over lands that were finally at peace. So much had changed. The ruins had been rebuilt, transformed back into the seat of power they'd once been. Desmond had been tried and exiled, sent beyond pack boundaries to live out his days alone, a fate worse than death for a wolf. His supporters had either bent the knee or followed him into exile. Kael's reforms had been reinstated, expanded even. Omegas now had paths to education and respect. The orphanage had full funding. Relations with neighboring packs had been restored, bringing prosperity to all. And I had found my place not as the worthless Omega I'd been told I was, but as Luna, queen, healer, and partner to a king who valued me above all others. Arms wrapped around me from behind, and I leaned into Kael's embrace. The mate bond thrummed between us, strong and unbreakable, a constant reminder of the connection we shared. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his voice warm against my ear. "How much has changed?" I said. 6 months ago, I thought I was walking to my death. Instead, I found my life. "We found each other," Kael corrected. Everything else just followed from that. He turned me to face him, and in his golden eyes I saw forever. Love. Partnership. Home. "The moon goddess works in mysterious ways," I said softly, turning a sacrifice into salvation, a curse into a blessing, a monster into a mate. "You were never a sacrifice," Kael said fiercely. "You were always meant to be a queen, my queen, the pack's queen. You just needed the chance to prove it." I kissed him then, pouring everything I felt into it. Gratitude, love, joy, hope for the future we would build together. When we finally broke apart, both smiling, Kael rested his forehead against mine. Ready to face tomorrow? He asked. I thought about the council meeting scheduled for the morning, the diplomatic visits planned for next week, the 100 small decisions that came with ruling. I thought about the life stretching ahead of us, full of challenges, certainly, but also full of love and purpose. I thought about the fact that I was no longer alone. I'm ready, I said. As long as we face it together, always together, Kael promised. From this day until the moon calls us home. And as the sun set on our kingdom, painting the sky in shades of gold and silver, the colors of our bond, the colors of our love, I knew with absolute certainty that I had found exactly where I belonged. They bound her hands and left her in the forest to die. Together, they broke a curse, reclaimed a kingdom, and proved that the moon goddess's wisdom exceeds all understanding. This is the story of Nyla and Kael the Omega, who became a queen, and the cursed king who found salvation in love. May their tale remind us that our worth is not determined by how others see us, but by who we truly are, and that sometimes the path to our destiny begins where we least expect it, even in the dark heart of a forbidden forest.